The pre-dawn chill of Aviano Air Base, Italy, clung to everything, a stark contrast to the simmering heat of the conflict brewing just a few hundred miles east. It was a morning like many others in the spring of 1994, yet imbued with an unspoken gravity that settled deep in the bones of every airman. Inside the dimly lit briefing room, the air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and nervous anticipation. Maps adorned the walls, crisscrossed with flight paths and no-fly zones, each line representing a potential flashpoint, a boundary between fragile peace and outright war. The pilots, clad in their olive flight suits, listened intently, their faces etched with a mixture of professional focus and the quiet understanding of the immense responsibility they carried. These were the guardians of Operation Deny Flight, tasked with enforcing the United Nations no-fly zone over Bosnia-Herzegovina, a mandate born from the brutal realities of a civil war that threatened to engulf the entire Balkan region. Their mission today was a routine patrol, or so it was briefed. But in the volatile skies above Bosnia, routine was a word stripped of its usual comfort. Every sortie carried the inherent risk of encountering hostile forces, of being drawn into the deadly dance of aerial combat. The intelligence reports were always a mosaic of fragmented data, whispers of radar activity, and unconfirmed movements of ground-based air defense systems. Today, however, there was a subtle undercurrent of heightened alert, a sense that the chessboard was shifting. The F-16 fighting Falcons, sleek and deadly machines, stood ready on the tarmac, their engines cold but their systems primed for action. Each jet was a marvel of engineering, a testament to technological prowess, yet ultimately its fate rested on the skill and courage of the human being strapped into its cockpit. The pilots, a blend of seasoned veterans and eager young aviators, performed their pre-flight checks with meticulous precision, their movements economical and practiced. They ran through checklists, verified fuel loads, and confirmed weapon armaments, a lethal payload designed to deter aggression and, if necessary, to neutralize threats. The weight of their nation's trust, and indeed the hope for stability in a fractured land, rested squarely on their shoulders. As the first slivers of dawn painted the eastern sky with hues of bruised purple and fiery orange, the ground crews gave their final thumbs up. The canopy closed with a definitive thud, sealing the pilot within his metallic cocoon, a world of dials, screens, and the rhythmic hum of life support. The roar of the F-16's engine igniting was a visceral sound, a deep, guttural growl that vibrated through the very ground, signaling the awakening of a predator. One by one, the jets taxied towards the runway, their afterburners flaring like incandescent torches in the fading darkness. The air crackled with radio chatter, terse and professional, as they received final clearance for takeoff. The runway stretched before them, a black ribbon leading into the unknown. With a final surge of power, the first F-16 hurtled down the tarmac, gathering speed with astonishing rapidity, its powerful engine pushing it skyward. It clawed its way into the nascent light, followed swiftly by its wingmen, a formation of steel birds ascending into the vast expanse. Below, the airbase slowly receded, becoming a patchwork of lights against the darkening earth. Above, the sky was a canvas of infinite possibilities, but also of unseen dangers. The ascent was swift, a powerful climb through layers of cool air. The pilots settled into their rhythm, their eyes scanning the instruments, their minds already processing the complex data streams flowing into their helmets. They were leaving behind the relative safety of Italian airspace, pushing eastward towards the jagged peaks and war-torn valleys of Bosnia. The mission, initially framed as a simple patrol, now felt heavier, charged with an unspoken tension that permeated the cockpit. The radio silence, broken only by essential communications, amplified the sense of isolation, the feeling of being a lone sentinel in a vast, indifferent sky. As they crossed the Adriatic, the sea below was a dark, featureless expanse, mirroring the uncertainty that lay ahead. The sun, now fully risen, cast long shadows across the clouds, creating an ethereal landscape that belied the brutal realities unfolding beneath them. They were entering a theater where the rules of engagement were constantly tested, where every radar sweep, every distant radio transmission could signal the beginning of a deadly confrontation. The air was thin, cold, and unforgiving, much like the conflict they were flying into. The pilots knew that somewhere below, eyes were watching, radars were sweeping, and intentions were hardening. The calm before the storm was palpable, a fragile veneer over a powder keg. They were about to cross an invisible line, a threshold into a zone where the very air seemed to hum with latent hostility. The instruments glowed steadily, but the true picture of what awaited them remained shrouded just beyond the horizon, waiting to reveal itself with terrifying suddenness. What secrets did the Bosnian skies hold for them this day? As the F-16 formation sliced through the crisp morning air, leaving the familiar shores of Italy far behind, the landscape below began its dramatic transformation. The azure expanse of the Adriatic gave way to the rugged, unforgiving terrain of the Balkan Peninsula. A tapestry of dense forests, snow-capped mountains, and winding rivers that had for centuries borne witness to countless conflicts. For the pilots, this visual shift was a stark reminder of the transition from routine patrol to active combat zone. Their eyes, though constantly scanning the horizon and the array of sophisticated instruments before them, also absorbed the grim beauty of the land below, a land scarred by the relentless brutality of war. The tension in the cockpit, once a subtle hum, now vibrated with a more pronounced intensity. Every flicker on the radar screen, every static-laced voice on the radio was scrutinized for signs of impending danger. They were flying into a complex, multi-layered threat environment where danger could emerge from the ground, from the air, or even from the unpredictable political currents swirling beneath them. NATO's watchful eye, however, was never far. High above, the E-3 Sentry AWACS aircraft, a flying command and control center, orbited tirelessly, its distinctive rotating radar dome sweeping the skies for hundreds of miles. This airborne sentinel was the nerve center of Operation Deny Flight, providing an unparalleled real-time picture of the airspace. Ground control stations, manned by a multinational team of specialists, processed torrents of data, correlating radar contacts, deciphering electronic emissions, and piecing together the fragmented puzzle of the battlefield. The F-16 pilots were in constant, albeit terse, communication with these vital assets, receiving updates on potential threats and strategic directives. The intelligence picture, though never entirely complete, painted a grim reality. Serbian air defense systems, including sophisticated surface-to-air missile SAM batteries, were known to be active and highly capable. Furthermore, the possibility of encountering enemy fighter aircraft, primarily MiG-29s, was a constant, chilling consideration. These were not mere training exercises. These were life-or-death calculations made in fractions of a second, with the lives of their wingmen and the success of the mission hanging in the balance. The objective of their patrol was clear: to maintain the integrity of the no-fly zone, to deter any unauthorized aerial activity, and to gather intelligence on potential violations. The rules of engagement were stringent, designed to prevent escalation while still allowing for decisive action when necessary. But the line between deterrence and direct confrontation was often razor-thin, blurred by the fog of war and the unpredictable nature of human conflict. As they pushed deeper into Bosnian airspace, the first unambiguous signs of trouble began to manifest. A series of faint blips appeared on their radar screens, initially ambiguous, then coalescing into distinct contacts. Simultaneously, the electronic warfare systems in their F-16s began to chirp, signaling the detection of hostile radar emissions. These were the telltale signatures of ground-based air defense systems, their powerful beams sweeping the sky, searching for intruders. The pilots' hearts pounded, a primal rhythm against the steady hum of their engines. The calm, professional voices on the radio from AWACS confirmed their fears. Multiple ground-based radar activations, bearing 270, range 120 kilometers, tracking your formation. The words were clinical, yet they carried the weight of imminent danger. The air in the cockpit grew heavy, charged with an almost electric tension. The pilots initiated defensive countermeasures, deploying chaff and flares, hoping to confuse the enemy radar. Their eyes darted between their instruments and the vast expanse of sky, searching for any visual confirmation of the threat. The blips on the radar grew more insistent, closer, more menacing. The electronic warfare warnings escalated from chirps to a shrill, piercing tone, indicating that a SAM site had achieved a lock-on. This was no longer a theoretical threat, it was a direct, immediate danger. The decision point was upon them. Do they engage the threat, risking a direct confrontation and potential escalation, or do they attempt to evade, hoping to break the lock and escape the missile's deadly embrace? The seconds stretched into an eternity, each one laden with the potential for catastrophic consequences. The lead pilot's voice cut through the radio static, calm but firm, issuing orders for evasive maneuvers. The F-16s banked sharply, their powerful engines screaming in protest as they pulled Gs, attempting to throw off the enemy's targeting solution. The ground below, once a distant tapestry, now seemed to rush towards them, a blur of green and brown. The radar warning receiver shrieked again, a sound that chilled them to the bone, indicating a missile launch. They were no longer just patrolling, they were fighting for their lives. The first missile, an unseen harbinger of destruction, was now streaking towards them, a silent, deadly arrow aimed at their very existence. The question wasn't if they would be hit, but how they would survive this sudden, brutal onslaught. The sudden, piercing shriek of the missile warning receiver had ripped through the relative calm of the cockpit, shattering any illusion of a routine patrol. The F-16s, now fully engaged in a desperate dance of survival, executed violent evasive maneuvers, their airframes groaning under the immense G-forces. The pilots, their training kicking in, fought against the crushing pressure, their eyes glued to the instruments, searching for any indication of the incoming threat. But this was not their primary mission. Their original objective, before the skies had erupted into chaos, had been to neutralize a specific target, a suspected Serbian command and control facility nestled deep within a forested valley near Banja Luka. This facility was believed to be coordinating illicit military movements and violating the no-fly zone, posing a direct threat to the fragile peace efforts. The approach had been meticulously planned, designed to exploit terrain masking and minimize exposure to known air defense sites. They had navigated through treacherous mountain passes, flying low and fast, their senses heightened, every shadow a potential hiding place for an enemy gun. The attack run itself was a blur of intense concentration. As the target came into view on their targeting pods, a small cluster of buildings partially obscured by camouflage netting. The lead pilot initiated the final attack sequence. The F-16, a precision instrument of war, locked onto its objective. With the terse Fox 2 away over the radio, the ordnance was released. Smart bombs, guided by laser and GPS, designed to strike with pinpoint accuracy. The bombs detached cleanly, tumbling silently towards their mark, leaving a brief, almost imperceptible trail in the air. Seconds later, a distant flash and a muffled thud confirmed the strike. A plume of smoke began to rise from the target area, a grim testament to the destructive power they wielded. The immediate aftermath, however, offered no respite. The very act of engaging the target had revealed their position, drawing the attention of every hostile sensor in the vicinity. Almost immediately, the sky around them erupted with a barrage of ground fire, anti-aircraft artillery shells bursting in angry black puffs, their trajectories arcing dangerously close. The F-16s jinked and weaved, their pilots pushing their machines to the very edge of their performance envelopes, trying to outmaneuver the deadly flak. But the ground fire was merely a prelude to a far more dangerous threat. As they completed their egress from the target area, attempting to regain altitude and distance, a new set of contacts blazed across their radar screens. These were not ground-based threats. These were fast-moving, airborne signatures. Bogies! Multiple bogies bearing 100 closing fast. The warning crackled through their headsets. The blood ran cold. Enemy fighters, the dreaded MiG-29s, the most advanced aircraft in the Serbian inventory, had been scrambled. The initial shock gave way to a surge of adrenaline, a primal instinct for survival overriding all other thoughts. This was the moment they had trained for, the ultimate test of skill, technology, and nerve. The F-16 pilots immediately jettisoned their external fuel tanks, lightening their aircraft for maximum maneuverability. The air-to-air combat systems, previously dormant, now sprang to life, their targeting reticles dancing across the heads-up display. The sky, moments ago a canvas of dawn, had transformed into a deadly arena. The first MiG-29 appeared as a dark silhouette against the brightening eastern sky, a menacing shape closing rapidly. Its twin engines left a faint contrail, a ghostly finger pointing directly at the NATO formation. The F-16 pilots initiated aggressive defensive turns, attempting to gain a positional advantage to get on the six of their adversaries. The radio became a cacophony of urgent commands and status reports, each word a desperate plea for information, for an edge in the unfolding chaos. The MiGs, flown by experienced pilots, were equally aggressive, pressing their attack with a ferocity that left no doubt as to their intentions. The air was thick with the invisible currents of electronic warfare, jamming and counter-jamming, each side attempting to blind and confuse the other. The F-16s, with their superior avionics and missile technology, held an advantage, but in the close-quarters melee of a dogfight, pilot skill and sheer luck often played a decisive role. The first missile launch from an enemy fighter was a terrifying sight, a streak of white smoke arcing through the sky, heading directly for the lead F-16. The pilot, with a desperate flick of the stick, pulled his jet into a bone-jarring break, deploying flares in a desperate attempt to decoy the heat-seeking missile. The missile, fooled by the sudden burst of heat, veered off course, exploding harmlessly in the distance. But this was just the beginning. The sky was now a swirling vortex of high-speed aircraft, each vying for a kill, each fighting for its very existence. The initial encounter had escalated into a full-blown aerial battle, a deadly ballet of steel and fire. What would be the cost of this sudden, brutal engagement? What do you think was going through the pilot's mind at this exact moment? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The sky over Banja Luka had transformed into a maelstrom of high-speed combat, a terrifying ballet of steel and fire. The initial missile launch from the MiG-29 had been successfully evaded, but it served as a brutal awakening, a stark confirmation that this was no mere skirmish. This was a fight for survival. The F-16 pilots, their hearts hammering against their ribs, were now fully immersed in the chaos of air-to-air engagement. The MiGs, agile and aggressive, pressed their attack with relentless determination, their pilots clearly intent on denying NATO access to their airspace. The F-16s, with their advanced avionics and superior missile capabilities, responded in kind, their pilots executing complex maneuvers designed to gain a tactical advantage. The dogfight was a dizzying array of turns, climbs, and dives, each aircraft pushing its airframe to the absolute limits of endurance. The G-forces were immense, threatening to black out the pilots, but their training and sheer willpower kept them conscious and focused. The air was thick with the invisible currents of electronic warfare. Both sides deployed chaff and flares, attempting to blind and confuse the enemy's radar and infrared sensors. The F-16's radar warning receivers shrieked almost continuously, indicating multiple threats, not just from the MiGs, but also from the ground. The Serbian air defense network, now fully alerted, was launching a barrage of surface-to-air missiles, adding another layer of deadly complexity to the already frantic aerial battle. The pilots had to contend with threats from above, below, and all around, making split-second decisions that determined life or death. A pilot's voice, strained but clear, cut through the radio chatter. "Sam, launch! Bearing 090 high aspect." Another F-16 was forced into a violent break, narrowly avoiding the incoming missile, which detonated harmlessly in its wake, sending a shockwave through the air. The sheer volume of threats was overwhelming, testing the limits of even the most experienced aviators. The F-16s, though outnumbered, were not without their own formidable arsenal. With a calm professionalism that belied the pandemonium, the lead pilot acquired a lock on one of the pursuing MiGs. Fox 1, he called out, launching an AM-120 AMRAAM missile. The missile streaked away from the F-16, a silent, deadly hunter, its radar seeker guiding it towards its target. Moments later, a distant explosion blossomed in the sky, a fiery confirmation of a successful hit. One MiG was down, but the celebration was short-lived. The remaining MiGs, seemingly undeterred, redoubled their efforts, pressing their attack with renewed vigor. The battle was far from over. The sky was a canvas of smoke trails, missile plumes, and the flashing afterburners of high-performance jets. The pilots were fighting not just for their mission, but for each other, their wingmen, their very lives. The stakes were incredibly high, with the credibility of NATO's no-fly zone and the lives of the pilots hanging precariously in the balance. Then, a chilling development. One of the F-16s, caught in a deadly crossfire between a MiG and a ground-launched SAM, took a direct hit. A sickening flash of orange and black erupted from its fuselage, followed by a plume of smoke. "Mayday! Mayday! Viper 2 is hit! I'm losing control!" A frantic voice screamed over the radio, laced with terror and desperation. The other pilots watched in horror as their wingman's jet began to tumble, spiraling uncontrollably towards the unforgiving earth below. The sight was a gut-wrenching blow, a stark reminder of the brutal realities of aerial combat. The loss of a comrade, even in the heat of battle, sent a wave of shock through the remaining formation. The air suddenly felt colder, the stakes even higher. The battle had claimed its first victim, and the grim realization settled in: they were not invincible. The enemy was capable, determined, and now emboldened by their success. The remaining F-16s, now down a man, had to make a critical decision: continue the engagement, risking further losses, or attempt a desperate escape from the increasingly hostile airspace. The choice was agonizing, fraught with peril, and had to be made in an instant. The sky, once a realm of freedom, had become a deadly trap, and the path to survival was rapidly narrowing. The loss of Viper 2 was a punch to the gut, a stark, brutal reminder of the fragility of life in the unforgiving crucible of aerial combat. The remaining F-16 pilots, their minds reeling from the sight of their wingman's jet spiraling earthward, knew that staying to fight was no longer an option. The odds had shifted decisively against them. The Serbian MiGs, emboldened by their success, pressed their attack with renewed ferocity, while the ground-based SAM sites continued their relentless barrage. The air was a chaotic symphony of missile warnings, radar locks, and the desperate calls of their comrades. The lead pilot, his voice tight with controlled urgency, issued the order: "Break! Break! All Vipers, egress south, maximum speed!" It was a desperate gamble, a race against time and a determined enemy. The F-16s, now flying for their lives, pushed their powerful engines to their absolute limits, their afterburners blazing like twin suns as they attempted to outrun their pursuers. Evasive maneuvers became a frantic, continuous sequence. The pilots threw their jets into bone-jarring turns, climbed at impossible angles, and dove towards the terrain, using every trick in their extensive training to shake off the MiGs and evade the incoming SAMs. The airframe groaned under the strain, the G-forces threatening to tear the wings from the fuselage. Inside the cockpit, the pilots fought against the crushing pressure, their vision tunneling, their bodies screaming in protest. Every flicker on the radar, every distant flash of an exploding missile, was a stark reminder of how close they were to joining their fallen comrade. Communication was frantic, a jumble of status reports, warnings, and desperate pleas for information. "Viper 3, I'm taking fire from the ground, multiple hits on my right wing," a pilot yelled, his voice strained with fear and pain. The damage assessment was grim. Systems were failing, warning lights illuminated the cockpit, and the very integrity of their aircraft was compromised. The pursuit was relentless, the MiGs clinging to their tails like hungry wolves, their missiles a constant, terrifying threat. The human cost of this desperate escape was immense. Beyond the physical toll of the G-forces and the constant threat of death, there was the psychological burden, the fear, the adrenaline-fueled terror, the agonizing thought of home, of loved ones who might never see them again. Each pilot was a solitary figure in his cockpit, yet bound by an unbreakable bond of camaraderie and shared peril. They fought not just for themselves, but for each other, for the memory of their fallen wingman. The landscape below, once a distant blur, now seemed to rush towards them with terrifying speed as they hugged the terrain, attempting to use the mountains and valleys as cover. The MiGs, however, were equally adept at low-level flying, their pilots demonstrating a skill that matched their aggression. The chase continued, a deadly game of cat and mouse played out at supersonic speeds over a war-torn land. Then, another devastating blow. "Viper 3 is hit again. I'm ejecting! Ejecting!" The chilling words echoed through the radio, followed by the sound of an explosion and the sudden violent silence of a lost signal. Another F-16, crippled beyond recovery, had succumbed to the relentless assault. The remaining pilots watched in agonizing helplessness as a parachute blossomed briefly against the smoke-filled sky, a tiny speck of hope in a vast expanse of despair, before disappearing behind a ridge. 2 down. The realization was crushing. They were now severely outnumbered, deep behind enemy lines, their fuel dwindling and their aircraft potentially damaged. The immediate threat from the MiGs seemed to lessen as they broke off their pursuit, perhaps low on fuel or ammunition themselves, or perhaps content with the damage they had inflicted. But the relief was fleeting. They were still in hostile territory, far from friendly lines, and the ground below was crawling with enemy forces. The escape had been desperate, costly, and far from over. They had survived the immediate aerial onslaught, but now faced a new, equally terrifying challenge, navigating their way back to safety, alone and vulnerable, through a land that wanted them dead. If you're finding this story as gripping as I am, hit that like button and subscribe for more untold tales from history. The immediate aerial threat had receded, leaving behind a chilling silence in the wake of the intense dogfight. But for the surviving F-16 pilots, the ordeal was far from over. They were deep within hostile territory, their fuel gauges dropping steadily, and the lingering fear of ground-based threats was a constant companion. The journey home was not merely a matter of pointing their noses west. It was a perilous navigation through a landscape bristling with unseen dangers. They flew low, hugging the contours of the terrain, attempting to remain undetected by enemy radar and visual spotters. Every ridge, every valley, every patch of forest seemed to hold the potential for a hidden SAM site or an ambush. The air in the cockpit was heavy with the unspoken grief for their fallen comrades, a grim weight that pressed down on their already exhausted minds. Their aircraft, though still flying, bore the scars of battle, bullet holes, shrapnel damage, and the ominous flicker of warning lights on their instrument panels. As they pressed westward, a new, unexpected contact appeared on their radar. Not a ground-based threat this time, but another airborne signature, closing rapidly from their 6 o'clock. The blood ran cold once more. Had the MiGs returned? Or was this a fresh interceptor scrambled to finish the job? The lead pilot, his voice a strained whisper, ordered evasive action, pushing his damaged jet into another series of desperate maneuvers. They were low on fuel, low on ammunition, and running on fumes of adrenaline and sheer willpower. This felt like the final confrontation, the last roll of the dice. They were cornered, out of options, facing what seemed like an inevitable end. The enemy aircraft, a single MiG-29, closed to within visual range, its menacing silhouette growing larger in their rearview mirrors. The pilot of the MiG seemed to be toying with them, maintaining a perfect tracking position, a predator circling its wounded prey. The F-16 pilots braced for the inevitable missile launch, their hands clenched on the controls, their eyes scanning for any sign of the deadly plume. But then, something entirely unforeseen happened. The MiG-29, instead of launching its missiles, suddenly broke off its attack. It executed a wide, sweeping turn, its pilot giving a brief, almost imperceptible wing waggle, a gesture that could be interpreted as either a taunt or incredibly a sign of acknowledgement. Then, without firing a single shot, the MiG turned eastward and disappeared back into the hostile skies from which it had emerged. The F-16 pilots watched in stunned silence, their minds struggling to process what had just transpired. Was it a malfunction? A lack of fuel or ammunition on the MiG's part? Or was it something else entirely, an unexpected act of mercy, a moment of shared humanity between adversaries in the brutal theater of war? The question hung in the air, unanswered, leaving them with a profound sense of bewilderment and an unsettling gratitude. The reprieve, whatever its origin, was real. They had been given a second chance, a lifeline thrown from the most unlikely of sources. The crossing of the border into friendly airspace was marked not by celebration, but by a profound, almost overwhelming sense of relief. The tension that had gripped them for hours finally began to dissipate, leaving behind a crushing wave of exhaustion. The radio chatter from NATO ground control, once a source of urgent warnings, now offered comforting vectors and landing instructions. As they descended towards Aviano, the familiar lights of the airbase appeared like beacons of hope in the gathering dusk. The landing was rough, a testament to the damage their aircraft had sustained, but it was a landing nonetheless. As the canopies opened, revealing the pale, drawn faces of the pilots, the ground crews rushed forward, their expressions a mixture of relief and somber understanding. They had returned, but not without immense cost. The unexpected mercy shown by the MiG pilot, a fleeting moment of restraint in a day of unbridled aggression, would forever remain etched in their memories, a perplexing footnote to a harrowing ordeal. They had survived, but the scars of that day, both visible and invisible, would endure, shaping their understanding of conflict and the unpredictable nature of human interaction, even in the deadliest of circumstances. The return to Aviano was not a triumphant homecoming, but a somber debriefing. The surviving F-16s, riddled with bullet holes and shrapnel damage, were testament to the ferocity of the engagement. The pilots, their faces etched with exhaustion and grief, were immediately whisked away for medical checks and extensive debriefings. The adrenaline that had sustained them for hours now receded, leaving behind a profound emotional toll. The loss of two comrades weighed heavily on their minds, a stark reminder of the ultimate price of conflict. Each detail of the mission, from the initial briefing to the harrowing escape, was meticulously recounted, analyzed, and cross-referenced with radar data and intelligence reports. The incident over Banja Luka was not just another sortie. It was a pivotal moment, a brutal escalation that sent shockwaves through NATO command. It underscored the very real and dangerous capabilities of the Serbian Air Force and air defense systems, challenging the perceived dominance of NATO air power. The immediate impact of the incident was significant. It forced a re-evaluation of NATO's rules of engagement and a heightened awareness of the threats posed by the Bosnian Serb forces. The no-fly zone, while still in effect, was now understood to be a far more perilous undertaking. The engagement served as a stark lesson in the complexities of modern air warfare, where technological superiority did not guarantee immunity from determined and skilled adversaries. It highlighted the critical importance of robust electronic warfare capabilities, advanced missile technology, and above all, the unwavering courage and skill of the pilots. The incident became a case study in air combat tactics, analyzed for years to come by military strategists and aviators alike, shaping future training protocols and operational doctrines. It was a grim reminder that even in an era of precision-guided munitions and advanced stealth technology, the human element, the pilot's decision-making under extreme pressure, remained paramount. The pilots involved in the Banja Luka incident carried the weight of that day for the rest of their lives. Some continued their careers, their experiences forging them into even more formidable aviators. Others, perhaps, found the psychological burden too heavy, choosing different paths. Their reflections, years later, often centered on the raw intensity of the battle, the camaraderie forged in the crucible of combat, and the haunting memory of their fallen wingmen. The unexpected mercy shown by the MiG pilot, a fleeting moment of restraint amidst the chaos, remained a perplexing and poignant detail, a testament to the unpredictable nature of human interaction even between adversaries. It raised questions about the individual choices made in war, the fine line between duty and humanity. The enduring memory of the Banja Luka incident resonates even today, serving as a powerful historical marker within the broader context of the Bosnian War. It stands as a testament to the courage of the airmen who enforced the no-fly zone, often flying into harm's way to protect civilian populations and uphold international mandates. It reminds us of the immense human cost of conflict, the sacrifices made, and the profound psychological scars left behind. The lessons learned from that intense aerial battle continue to inform military strategy and international relations, underscoring the delicate balance between intervention and escalation. It is a story not just of machines and tactics, but of the men who flew them, their bravery, their losses, and the indelible mark left by a single brutal day in the skies over a war-torn land. The incident remains a powerful narrative, a stark reminder of the realities faced by those who stand on the front lines of global conflict, forever etched into the annals of military history. What do you think was the most significant outcome of this intense aerial battle? Let us know your perspective. If you want to delve deeper into the untold stories of conflict and courage, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next historical deep dive. Your support helps us bring these vital narratives to light.